Hey there. Welcome to another episode of English Podcast for Beginners. Imagine walking into a bustling cafe in London, the air filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the sounds of lively conversations all around you. You understand every word that's being said. But when it's your turn to speak, the words just don't come out as smoothly as you hoped. Frustrating, right? You're not alone. Many learners find themselves in this very situation. They understand English, but when it's time to speak, they struggle. Today, we're diving into that silent struggle, why it happens, and what you can do to break through it. You're already on your way to fluency, but sometimes that journey feels like trying to run a marathon while carrying a backpack full of doubts. But don't worry today. We're unpacking that backpack and giving you the tools you need to run freely. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the podcast and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, feel free to share where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's connect. No matter where you are in the world. Now, take a deep breath, relax, and let's dive into tonight's learning journey together. The struggle you're facing isn't uncommon, and it has a lot to do with the difference between passive understanding and active speaking. Sure, you can read a book or listen to a podcast in English and understand everything that's being said. But when you're asked to speak, it feels like there's an invisible barrier between your thoughts and the words. Why does that happen? First, it's important to know that understanding and speaking require different kinds of brain activity. When you understand English, you're usually listening or reading passively. You're absorbing information, and your brain is connecting the dots. However, when you speak, you have to recall and produce the information instantly, and that's a much more active process. It requires both quick thinking and linguistic confidence, and sometimes that confidence isn't fully there, even though your comprehension is strong. Some say the key to overcoming this barrier is speaking as much as possible, even when you're not sure of every word. But let's be honest, speaking when you're not confident can feel intimidating. So, how do we get past this? Well, one of the most useful tips is to practice thinking in English. Even when you're not speaking, start by narrating your day in your head. I'm going to the store now. Or, this is the kind of coffee I like. It might seem silly, but it helps make English feel more natural and less like something you're constantly translating. Remember how we talked about the power of thinking in English? It's a great first step. But what happens when you're ready to speak yet? The fear of making mistakes paralyzes you. It's a common hurdle. You understand English perfectly. But as soon as you try to say something, the nerves take over. You freeze. It's frustrating. And if we're honest, it's pretty discouraging too. Here's the thing. Your brain is wired to avoid mistakes, which is fantastic for many areas of life, but not so much when it comes to learning a new language. Some learners find themselves avoiding speaking altogether, fearing they'll sound wrong or incompetent. And when you avoid speaking, you're not giving yourself the chance to improve. So, how do you overcome this fear? First, let's address the biggest culprit, self-doubt. It's a natural part of the language learning process, but it doesn't have to control you. Every language learner has to face this challenge at some point, so don't let it stop you. A good way to start overcoming this fear is by practicing small, low-stakes conversations. It could be as simple as speaking to yourself in the mirror, or better yet, finding a language exchange partner who's also learning. This can be a great way to practice without feeling like you're being judged. Here's a quirky tip. Try talking to your pet. If you have one, it may sound funny. But speaking to an animal can take the pressure off because they can't judge you. It's a safe space to practice your pronunciation and sentence structure without the fear of someone correcting you mid-sentence. You'll be surprised at how much more comfortable you feel after practicing this way. And then, there's the idea of embracing mistakes. Some argue that making mistakes while speaking is part of the best way to learn. Each mistake you make is a learning opportunity, rather than seeing errors as setbacks. Consider them as stepping stones towards mastery. When you speak, you might say the wrong word or mispronounce something, and that's okay. The more you speak, the faster you'll recognize and correct those mistakes. And over time, your confidence will grow. Now that we've tackled fear and self-doubt, let's dive deeper into a powerful tool that can help build your speaking skills. Listening. It may seem like listening is more of a passive skill, right? But, believe it or not, how well you listen can directly affect how easily you speak. In fact, some of the most fluent speakers don't just speak well, they listen carefully. The more you immerse yourself in the language by actively listening, the more you'll start to recognize patterns, rhythms, and natural phrases that you can adopt in your own speech. Listening actively means more than just hearing the words. It's about understanding the flow, intonation, and emotion behind them. Think of it like this. When you hear a native speaker use a phrase like, "I'm doing great," you don't just understand the meaning, but you start to internalize the rhythm and feel of the phrase. Soon enough, you'll be able to use that same phrase naturally in conversation, without having to think about it. This is one of the most effective ways to get your speaking skills to match your understanding. One method you can use is listening to podcasts or watching TV shows in English without subtitles at first, or with subtitles in English if you need them. This helps you catch the words and phrases that are commonly used in casual conversation. Pay attention not only to the words themselves, but also to how speakers emphasize certain phrases, their intonation, and how they naturally group words together. The more you listen, the more you'll start speaking with the same fluidity. But here's a quirky learning technique. Try shadowing. Shadowing means repeating exactly what you hear, as soon as you hear it. You can do this with podcasts, TV shows, or YouTube videos. Repeat the sentences out loud as you hear them, trying to mimic the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and even their emotions. It's like playing a game of language catch-up, and it's an excellent way to train your brain to speak faster and more naturally. Plus, the more you practice, the less likely you'll be to freeze when it's your turn to speak. Remember that listening also feeds into speaking by providing you with new vocabulary and ways of structuring your sentences. When you understand how sentences are put together, you'll find that speaking becomes less of a challenge and more of a creative act. You'll start to play with words, just like you play with building blocks, stacking them together into your own unique statements. So far, we've worked on breaking down fear, embracing mistakes, and actively listening to boost your speaking abilities. But there's one more essential element to make your English speaking journey smooth: practice. Let's face it, no one becomes fluent overnight. And while understanding English can happen quickly, speaking it fluently requires regular practice. And not just any practice, purposeful, consistent practice. Speaking is a muscle, and like any muscle, it needs to be exercised regularly to grow stronger. One of the most common struggles learners face is finding opportunities to practice. It's easy to listen to a podcast or read a book in English, but how often are you actually speaking? And when you do speak, do you feel like you're just repeating memorized phrases or struggling to get your thoughts out? The key to breaking this cycle is integrating English into your daily routine. Start small and build up talk to yourself. Narrate your day or describe what's happening around you. You'll be surprised at how much more fluid and natural your speech becomes just by practicing little by little. A mainstream technique that helps with speaking fluency is practicing with language exchange partners. The exchange doesn't need to be formal. Find someone who speaks English and is willing to help you practice. Or use language exchange apps where you can chat with people from all over the world. This kind of interaction is incredibly helpful because you can get real-time feedback and also learn to handle the unpredictable nature of real conversations, something that textbooks just can't provide. However, if you're still not feeling comfortable having real conversations, here's a quirky method you can try. Speaking to inanimate objects. I know, it sounds odd, but try narrating to your water bottle or your shoes. Pretend your objects are listening to you, and talk about the tasks you need to do or the things you observe around you. It's a fun, stress-free way to practice speaking aloud without worrying about someone else's judgment. Plus, it might get a laugh or two from your family members talk about adding some humor to the mix. Remember, the more you practice, the more your brain will wire itself to speak in English. Don't be afraid of sounding silly. Every time you speak, you're one step closer to fluency. And don't underestimate the power of repeating things you hear. It helps you get into the rhythm of the language and teaches you how to naturally structure your sentences. Without overthinking, as we wrap up today's journey, it's important to reflect on one of the most crucial aspects of learning English: embracing mistakes. You've heard it before, but I can't stress it enough. Mistakes are not your enemy. In fact, they are your greatest ally on this language learning path. If you're waiting for the perfect moment to speak, where everything will go smoothly and without errors, you're going to be waiting forever. Language is messy, it's imperfect, and it's beautiful because of that. The more you embrace mistakes, the more progress you'll make. Let's talk about that uncomfortable feeling of making an error while speaking. It can feel like the end of the world, right? But in reality, every mistake is a step toward fluency. Think about it. Every time you make a mistake and correct it, your brain strengthens that pathway. Each misstep adds a new layer to your speaking ability. So, the next time you make a mistake, instead of feeling defeated, celebrate it. You've learned something new and, more importantly, you've made progress. A lot of learners get stuck in perfectionism, thinking that their English needs to sound exactly like a native speaker's, and they start avoiding speaking altogether. But some argue that focusing too much on perfect pronunciation or grammar actually holds you back. Why? Because when you're obsessed with perfection, you're more likely to avoid speaking, and avoiding speaking means you're not practicing. So, give yourself permission to mess up. In fact, try to aim for a certain number of mistakes a day. The more mistakes you make, the more fluent you'll become. It sounds counterintuitive, but the more you practice failing, the better you'll get. Here's a quirky tip. Treat your mistakes like language trophies. Every time you make an error, jot it down in a notebook and revisit it. Not only will this help you track your progress, but you'll also get a kick out of seeing how much you've improved over time. Think of it as a quirky journal of your journey, one full of your unique, funny mistakes. Remember, fluency comes from the ability to speak freely, without holding back because of fear, and the only way to get there is to speak as much as possible, accept your errors, and grow from them. By now, you've learned how essential it is to practice, how listening helps, how to break free from self-doubt, and how to embrace your mistakes. This is your toolkit. Use it to keep building your confidence and developing your speaking skills. Now, as we wrap up this journey, take a moment to relax and remind yourself you're getting better every day. And you're on the right path. It's okay if you don't have all the answers yet. The important thing is that you're making progress. And progress is all that matters. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine that you're standing on the edge of a vast ocean, the soft waves gently kissing the shore. Just like those waves, your progress in English is continuous, patient, and steady. Sometimes it feels like you're moving slowly, but trust me, every small effort you make adds up. You're closer to speaking confidently than you realize. So, as we come to the end of today's episode, remember this. The struggle to speak English is just a temporary challenge. You are capable. And with each step, each practice, and yes, each mistake, you are building the skills you need to become a fluent English speaker. Let that reassurance sink in. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. And you're already making great strides. The journey isn't always easy, but take it one day at a time, and you'll find that soon. Speaking English will feel natural. No rush. No pressure, just steady. Mindful practice. Now, as we fade out, keep going with your learning. And remember, you've got this. Keep practicing, embrace those mistakes, and watch yourself grow. Thank you for listening to this episode of English Podcast for Beginners. Take care. And until next time, keep going, you're doing amazing.